So today we're going to have two main focus points. For obviously the hips and the spine, but within that we're going to have focus points. With the hips, we're going to mainly focus on performing rotation because it is a ball socket joint. And within the spine, we're going to focus on segmentation as well as extension. And now the main reason is this. If we think of, life in general, and we can't give 6 hours a day to do mobility training, and we want to try and find something that's specific to me as an individual in the amount of time that I can actually invest in it, well, let's look at the priorities. So with it being a ball socket joint in the hip, well, obviously we want it to rotate. If you as an individual find that challenging, well, now we can really start to look at exercises to help you increase that. So get better at it. In terms of the spine, we wanted to segment, so like flexion and extension, because it's not going to rotate if you already have, a couple of vertebrae within your spine that are stuck together. So think about it this way. If you're somebody who has a lower back pain and you have a lot of tension within the back, okay, and you've got 3 or 4 vertebrae and they're really stuck together, they're apprehensive and they're holding on to all that tension. Well, if you want to try to rotate as an example, it's already going to be affected, okay? Because what's going to happen is if we have 3 or 4 vertebrae stuck together, the top and the bottom, which is the weak points because they do rotate, that's where it's going to rotate from. And then you're going to have this big chunk that isn't actually rotating. So if you are an individual who can only invest a certain amount of time into this, well, then I think if you focus on segmentation and you get that performing better, well, then you're already going to rotate more efficiently, okay? And so the goal today is teach you the techniques as to why we're doing things, show you exercises, follow along if you wish. I do encourage you. I think it'll be very beneficial. And Arvel's going to do all the hard work. I'm just going to keep talking for the next hour or so, okay? Right. So what I like to do first of all is I like to kind of warm up the area that we're going to train. And there's, it's very similar to kind of like a strength base. It's very similar to a conditioning. It's like if I'm going to make something quite intense, I find the level that's quite easy just to allow me to warm up. So what I'm going to do is I'll get Avril to demonstrate, but if you want to follow along, now is your time. Before we start, you'll notice that we have a few things. So if you're obviously at home, I can give you an idea of what you will need, all right? I have a foam roller, I have yoga blocks, and I have some mats. If you do not have any of those at your disposal, I would suggest that you grab some pillows, loads of them, and then a nice comfortable kind of flooring. If you have a wooden floor, then it's essential that you have some pillows. Okay? And then just a good bit of space so that obviously you can see what we're doing. Water would be good too, yeah. It might get a bit sweaty. Okay, beautiful. So first things first, we're going to get into the spine first because it obviously is a bit more of a global movement. I'm going to get Avril onto all fours, so just in what we call a quadrupedal position. Now from here, I'm going to show you exercises that you've probably been exposed to before, and then I'm going to show you exercises that maybe you haven't. We're going to do a cat-cow just to get a little bit of movement into the spine. If you've done that before, that's fine, but I would still like you to watch this variation that I'm going to show you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Avril to push her back up to the ceiling as much as she can. So up, 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 like a big angry cat. You'll also notice that she's tucked her butt as well here. Okay, so she's tucked the butt. What we are looking for here is she's going to try to roll her hips out behind her. Just give me 1 second. I just want to make sure I'm in the right space so you can still see her. Okay. So what she's going to do here, like anteriorly tilt your pelvis. So think of your belly button going towards the floor. Yeah. And then keep going down, keep going down, keep going down till you look up towards the ceiling. Okay. Now tuck your chin first, push up through your upper back. Keep going back up into that really nice flex position. Okay. So it's slow and controlled, but we are trying to achieve as much range of motion that's available to us. All right. Set yourself up. I don't want you to worry about how many reps you're doing. We're going to go for 60 seconds. We'll go on 3, 2, 1, and let's go. So push up as high as you can, breathe out at the top, and then really try to peel back as best we can, okay? Slow and controlled wins the race on this one. I want you to think of each vertebrae of our spine. Is there an area when you carry out this movement that becomes a little bit too challenging? Is there an area that, maybe your hip shifts to the side, maybe your shoulders are shifting to the side? We want to try to be as symmetrical as we can, but we also want to understand that we are not symmetrical, okay? There's always discrepancies. We want to bring them as close to each other as possible. We've got 20 more seconds. Nice work, keep it going. We got 10 more seconds. Last 3, 2, 1. Slowly just come out of there into what's a comfortable position for you. If you can sit on the heels, or if you can just even come up into like a half kneeling position, whatever's more comfortable for you, okay? What I would like to do here is we're going to spend a bit of time on this because it's super important, and that's going to be a Jefferson curl, okay? Now with the Jefferson curl, we're going to be segmenting our spine as best we can. If you have a cushion or something like that, you're probably going to want to use it for this one, okay? I'm just going to get Avril to stand just facing me. Yeah, beautiful. Now what I recommend is that we put a block in between our knees, especially if you hold on to excess tightness in the back. If you don't have a block, a cushion, or something that just reminds you to keep tension is going to be fine, okay? So he pops in between the knees. Now, what we're going to do here, if we think about the cat-cow and we're getting a bit of blood flow into our spine, now we're going to test it here, okay? We're going to look to add more weight to the movement. So obviously our body weight could be the first point of call, then you might hold dumbbells in your arms as an example. All I'm going to get Avril to do is tuck her butt, so we're keeping that posterior tilt for as long as we can, just to help to lengthen all the tissue in the lower back. She's going to tuck her chin, roll her shoulders forward, and then start to peel down as if she was trying to touch her toes. So she's going to create as round a back as possible. You might see little jitteriness in this movement. It's just your body trying to decipher what's happening, especially if you haven't done this before, okay? You might also note that you might be sitting back too much. If you can, put a little bit more weight on the balls of your feet, and let's cycle through repetitions here, okay? I'll just wait till Avril comes up to the top, and then we'll start to go through it. So common mistakes here is that it becomes more like a stiff leg deadlift, which is where we just hinge from our hips. So it's more this sort of a movement where my back is staying quite flat. But actually what I want you to think about here is trying to round your back as much as you can. You really want to try to flex as much as possible. If you are somebody who's suffering with lower back pain, that's why I suggest you put something in between the knees. If you get to the bottom position and you realize you're a little bit stuck, put your hands on the floor, bend the knees, and then find a way to come out. Okay? We're going to cycle through 5 repetitions. And on the 5th rep, we're going to stay down the bottom for a 10-second hold. Ready to go? Okay, big deep breath in, tuck your chin, and then start to roll down towards your feet. Nice, slow, and controlled. If you do have access to weight, here as an example, you might hold some dumbbells or something very light, like 1 kilo, 2 kilo, or 4 or 5 pounds for my American friends. And just slow and controlled. What you might notice is as you start to cycle through these repetitions, it gets a little bit easier, okay? And that's because your body is now starting to become a bit more familiar to these particular patterns. And that's why I always say is that consistency trumps intensity with this sort of stuff. Because sometimes we just have to do more of it. If we haven't done enough of it, we just need to do a little bit more. Then you become aware of these positions. Then you take ownership of these positions. So we're going 5 repetitions. And on the 5th rep, I just want you to spend a little bit of time in that bottom position, okay? If you're a little bit nervous here, you could put your butt against the wall so you could actually stand over beside a wall. The security of the wall can help you, okay? Having that security just might allow you to go a little bit deeper, might allow you to segment a little bit better. Slow and controlled wins the race. That's okay. If you're at the bottom position and you're hanging with your hands aren't touching the floor and you feel a bit nervous, what you could also do is if you had a yoga block is you could hold it so that you know it's making contact with something. You'll actually feel yourself relax a little bit more because your body knows there's support there. If we think of tightness and we think of what it is, it's your body being apprehensive to carry out that movement pattern. So it's okay to grab a prop. It's okay to make your body feel comfortable, whatever way you need to do that, okay? So most of the visuals that you'll see here are targets if you can't get it. If you can get it, then that's where I would suggest you either stand up on a block as an example. So if you're somebody who can touch your toes, even standing on a step so you elevate is super beneficial. Okay, slowly come back up. That's 10, I would imagine. And then just have a little walk around. Yeah, you can walk around like a penguin if you like. If you had one exercise to choose to do weekly, daily, that's it, okay? It is a very global movement. Questions that I get asked with that movement are, should I keep my legs straight or should I bend my knees? This is what I want you to start to think about when you work with me and when you do this style of classes with me. The intent is what's most important, not how it looks. So with a Jefferson curl, the intent is segmentation through the spine. Can I segment my spine? Okay? The reason why that's important is because if I straighten my legs as an example, and I am somebody who's not comfortable lengthening my hamstrings, that could potentially already affect my ability to segment. So what I would say is if the intent is to get my spine moving and I need to bend my knees to do that, that's okay. If I need to sit against the wall, that's okay. If I need to sit into a chair and literally just allow my hands to come down my legs, that's okay. The intent is to segment the spine, okay? If we get better at it, we go higher with the legs, so then it's a longer distance to the floor. We add weight so that we add more resistance into the lower back. You as an individual can make that educated decision, okay? We will come back to that. So we're going to cycle through that and another exercise. What I'm going to get Avril to do here is I'm going to get you come back into your quadrupedal position. So quadrupedal position just means we're on all fours. What I'm going to get Avril to do, so if everybody's comfortable with this, this is good. If you want more of a challenge, I would encourage you to sit onto your heels. But if it's not comfortable on your quads, don't do it. It'll just keep you a bit more accountable, okay? What I'm going to get Avril to do is, so left elbow is going to go onto the floor. So she's resting on that. She's going to bring it, if she can, if you want to sit back more, you sit to where you feel like it's relatively comfortable and bring your elbows close to your knee once you found that position. So if you're not sitting on your heels, just bring your elbow to where you feel like there's a bit of a base because you're going to remove your right arm from the floor, okay? So you want to create like a secure base to allow you to do that. Right hand is going to go behind your head. You're going to take a big deep breath in, and as you breathe out, I want you to rotate so that your elbow is trying to go up towards the ceiling and you're trying to look up towards the ceiling. Then breathe in, come back down. Breathe out, go up. Breathe in, come down. Okay, beautiful. I think we have a good idea as to what we're doing. We're going to go through 45 seconds of that, and then we're going to swap over to the other side. Okay, get yourself ready. Sit in the deepest position that you can maintain. I'll start the clock in 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go. Breathe out as you rotate. The reason being is we want to try and release that tension to give us a little bit more access to the rotation. Now, I did mention that segmentation should be our priority, but there's a lot of things in life that involve us to rotate. If you ever try to pick up a kid out of a car, if you get something out of the fridge and you need to turn around, if you play golf, you play tennis, a lot of rotation. We might as well be good at it. You got 15 more seconds here. Nice big deep breaths in. Breathe out as you rotate. 3, 2, stay in that position. Just switch to the opposite side and continue on. Breathe out. Really try to rotate as best you can, okay? The more you have that ability to breathe out, the more rotation you're probably going to get access to. Really good, guys. Keep it going. We got 20 more seconds. Last 10. And 3, 2, 1. Okay, slowly come out of there. You're going back to your Jefferson curl. You're going back to that segmentation. We've got 5 repetitions, and then you got a 10-second hold at the bottom of that. If you want to put a block in between your knees, please do. If you want to put your hips against the wall, please do. And let's get straight into it, okay? Slow and control wins the race. I want you counting your own reps here. 5 in total. You might start to feel it a little bit easier this second round, or you might be able to go a little bit lower, okay? So remember, 5 in total. Really try to round your back as best you can. Don't forget to tuck your head. So you really want to tuck your chin. So when you're at that bottom position, ideally you're kind of looking at your knees or your shins. And then on that 5th rep, remember we're going to hold for 10 seconds. And then what you can do in that bottom position is you can start to even just sway your arms from side to side if it feels okay. Just a little bit of exploration. As you breathe in, take the biggest deep breath you can into your lower back. Really try to expand that tightness you might be feeling. As you breathe out, just see how heavy you can allow those hands to be. Remember, you can put a block down if you need to. You'll notice that you will actually feel a little bit more comfortable or a little bit more support, okay? 10 seconds in total. Once you've held that 10, just take a big deep breath in, bring yourself back up to standing. Have a little walk around if you need to. A penguin. Really good. Okay, so we're going back to our rotation now. You're going to go back into what I call a child's pose, or you're going to start in quadrupedal position. See if you can sit back towards the heel. The reason why we sit back towards the heel is just to kind of lock out the lower back so that you're really trying to rotate from your upper back, okay? If you think of where a bra strap would be, that's kind of where you're rotating from, okay? We're going to bend one arm, anchor it down on the ground, take the other arm off, put the hand behind the head, breathe out as you try to rotate, and I'll start the clock now. And on every rep, I want you just to see if you can go a little bit further, okay? So good strong breath, breathe out, see if you can go a little bit further. Nice work. As you breathe in, don't be afraid to create tension within the body. But then as you breathe out, just see how much you can still carry out the movement, but you can try get rid of, I suppose, that level of tension that you might be holding on to. You just got 5 more seconds here. Remember to stay in that position, just swap over to the opposite side, and let's continue. So good strong breaths. You'll notice that if you're in sync with your breath, this actually feels a lot easier. It's when we try to hold on to our breath or we try to rush our breath, you start to lose the coordination of actually carrying out the exercise. You got 15 more seconds. Last 10. And 5, 4, 3, 2. Okay, slowly come out and let's go up and have a little walk around. Feeling okay?
Great.
Yeah. Okay. So what we'll do next is we'll go into the hips. We'll also focus on an area that I think is important, which is obviously, so a second ago or a few minutes ago, we did internal rotation of the hip, okay? And we did it in more of like a stretch and a passive position. My advice now is we try to actually get more active in that position, okay? And the reason being is our approach could always be improving our range of motion, but then we also want to control that range of motion. So if you are somebody who's super flexible, you might not necessarily actually have to increase your range of motion, but there might be a discrepancy in the range of motion that you possess and the range of motion that you control. So you might actually have excess flexibility, so to speak, okay? And I'll touch on that as we go through it. But it's important that we try to get them as close to each other, so our passive and our active. The best way to think about it is this. If I'm somebody who can allow gravity to help me and push me into, let's just say a front split as an example. So let's say this is as low as I can go, right? Let's just say like this, okay? Well then in theory, when I stand up, I should be able to get my leg into that same position, okay? Me as an individual, if I have to try to lift it, I could probably get to 90 degrees, okay? So what that shows me is from 90 degrees to the position I just demonstrated, there's a bit of a discrepancy, okay? A discrepancy in that I can't actually control that position. I need gravity to get me into that position. And that's super important because that range of motion is where I want to try to get this closer to each other. So the chance of injury for me is less. Hopefully that makes sense, okay? If my tissue is in control when it's put into that lengthened position, it's less likely to tear. So, the way I like to approach things, a minute ago I got you to go into this 90-90 position. Obviously you were in that position, so I want you to replicate the position that you were just in. The difference here is we are going to change our upper body position to facilitate lifting our ankle, that's the back ankle, off the floor, okay? Let me show you. So what I'm doing here is I'm finding the best position. Those of you that said you were getting a pinch on the inside of the leg, you could always raise this back hip up a little bit to see if that helps. If you need more of a stretch in here, I just think of trying to shift that knee away from me a little bit more, okay? So I'm in 90-90. What I'm going to do here is this, right? I'm going to rotate my belly button towards the front leg. So I've kind of squared myself off. I'm going to hinge for my hips, so I'm leaning down as much as I can so that I can try to rotate from the top of my leg. Now, when I say I'm rotating from the top of my leg, I want you to watch the difference, okay? I could also lift my leg like this, which is where I've just hinged from my knee and tried to kick my butt, okay? That's not what we want. Remember, the intent is internal rotation on this back leg, so we want to rotate it. So you find the position, you lean as far forward as you need to be able to lift it. Then I challenge you to try to get as upright as you can and still remove it from the floor. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. So we're focusing on rotating this leg, the very, very top of it. You build as much tension as you need to. You hold onto this shin if you want to. You lean as far forward. And we go for 10 repetitions, and on the 10th rep, we're going to hold for 10 seconds. Okay, start to get yourself ready in a position that you find most challenging. Once you've found that position, let's cycle through 10 repetitions at your own count. On each rep, I challenge you to try to get more upright. It's okay if you need to lean really far forward. That is totally fine. But I do want you to try to get as upright as possible. So 10 in total, then a 10-second hold. When we do this exercise, there is a possibility that you might feel a little cramping sensation just here on the outside of the hip. My advice is to try to challenge yourself to go through it as long as you can. If you need to come out, come out. The reason this is happening is you're putting the muscle in a shortened position, and if it's not used to firing adequately and it doesn't have the support of all the surrounding muscles, a lot of the times it can give you that crampy feeling because it's getting overworked, all right? It is not going to injure you, it's totally fine, but I would suggest that you try your best to fight it as long as you can. And then obviously when you've done 10, swap over to the side. So the back leg is the one that we're looking to get off the floor, okay? So if we think of what's actually happening there, the leg is internally rotating. So she's trying to rotate it off the floor. So my knee is rotating, my femur is rotating at the top. Think of the top of your leg and just think of how much it's rotating inwards to let your foot come off the floor. There is different exercises where we would focus on the front leg. We will do those later. This is where we're focusing on for now, okay? Do 10-second holds out. Beautiful. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is a little bit more relaxed, all right? So there's ways of training our nervous system, and my advice is this. We do not want to fry our nervous system too much, and what we just did there is what I would class as being an active exercise, right? It was quite exerting, it's quite challenging. It can take a little bit of energy out of us. So a nice way to kind of work on that, work side by side with that, is now doing something that's obviously still beneficial, but just a little bit less in terms of the way it would exert. So we can get our nervous system to calm back down a little bit. And what we're going to do is this. Hopefully you'll see it at the angle that we're in. We're effectively going to be side lying in a fetal position. Okay? And I'm going to have my hands on top of each other. I'm in 90 degrees here. This may change, which I'll show you in a second. And what we're going to do is this, right? You'll notice that my head is kind of in no man's land here. If that is the case, grab a block and use it as a bit of a pillow. Now, what we're going to do is this. I'm going to push the top hand as far away from you as I can. From there, I'm going to draw like a semicircle, but I'm going to follow this hand. So I'm going to keep looking at this top hand. I'll take a big deep breath in, just watch me for the moment, and then I rotate around. And then I reverse. If that's easy, what you would do is you would straighten, let me just reiterate something. When you get to this sticking point, there is a point where you get a sticking point. Make sure the knees do not higher up, okay? So we try to keep the knees pinned down to the floor. All right? If you want more of a challenge, then what I suggest you do is you straighten the top leg. The foot of the bottom leg locks that top leg down. That makes it harder to rotate. So then we rotate all the way around. And then we reverse. With this one, you're just going to go for 45 seconds, and then we'll swap over to the other side. Okay? So just come into a sideline position. It's actually a nice relaxing move. If it's a bit pinchy on the shoulder, your finger doesn't have to stay on the floor. So if it's a bit pinchy on the shoulder, you don't have to keep your fingers on the floor. Higher them up to wherever suits. I'll start the clock in 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go. Breathe out when you feel that sticking point. Good. Let it come off the floor if you want, because I want you to finish all the way out in the T position. So if you need to take your fingers off, yeah, good. And then go all the way back. We're already over halfway on this side. So breathe out as you rotate. We got 10 more seconds on this side. Don't try and race through anything. It doesn't matter how many reps you get through. Just really focus on the quality. Finish the one you're on and then swap over to the opposite side. Really try and breathe out when you feel that tightness. As I mentioned before, your fingers can come off the floor to finish out the movement if you need to do that, okay? It's not essential to keep your fingers on the floor. Got 10 more seconds. And 3, 2, 1. Okay, slowly come up. You're going back into your 90-90 position. You're going to go back to your rear leg lift. Really trying to rotate from the top of the leg, 10 repetitions, and then on that 10th rep, I want you to hold for 10 seconds. Grab whatever props you need to carry out the movement. Challenge yourself to try and get in that most upright position that's available to you. It doesn't have to go super high, the leg. If anything, I want you to focus more on that, intent of rotation from the top of the leg. 10 in total, then a 10-second hold. Now what you'll notice is we do have differences from left to right, okay? Sometimes people will ask me, should I do an extra rep or an extra set on the bad side? I would say, it's not gonna be a bad thing, but I would definitely just focus on, just trying to balance things out. If you have a stronger side, the other side will catch up the more often you do this sort of things. If you want to do an extra set on the bad side, by all means do. Just watch and see how you kind of recover afterwards. Okay. You do 10-second hold. That was a pretty quick 10 seconds. Sorry. Don't forget Mississippi in between the 10 seconds, guys. Okay, we're going back to our nice little thoracic rotation, just in that side lying position. So again, you don't have to have the fingertips touching the floor. They can come up off the floor if needs to be. And I'll start the clock now. Slow and control wins the race here. Remember to breathe out when you feel that sticking point. Another thing I would challenge you to do is even squeeze the arm a little bit, pull the shoulder away from your ear. See if that allows you to rotate it a little bit better. If you are somebody with a bit of pinchiness in the shoulder, I find that can be very beneficial to help. 3, 2, finish the rep you're on, and then just go across to the opposite side. So try not to let those knees raise up. We really want to keep the knees pinned down on the floor if we can, okay? Another option that you could do is the bottom hand you could put onto your knees if you want to keep them down, and just let the top hand keep rotating the way it has been. You make that decision yourself, okay? We got 10 more seconds to go. 3, 2, 1. Okay, slowly come out of there. Have a little walk around. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, just keep walking around if you want, just as long as you can hear me, that's okay. The next thing what we're going to do is we're really going to get into the hip flexors here, and we're also going to get into our glutes. So we're going to be doing some leg lift variations. And these are super beneficial for everybody, but also, or at least if you are somebody who sits on your ass all day, then I would suggest this is something that you invest a lot of your time in, okay? The reason being is that if you're somebody who, let's just say for instance, you can't touch your toes. So standing in an upright position, trying to hinge, like what we did with the Jefferson curl, and not being able to touch your toes, okay? For a lot of people, we think of what's being lengthened. So example, if I'm in this position and I'm trying to touch my toes, my hamstrings are being lengthened here, okay? If you're someone who has the perception of tight hamstrings and you're constantly telling yourself you have tight hamstrings, well, guess what? You're right. But what I want to try to educate you on is, what is the reason that my hamstrings won't give me more access? Why are they holding on to that tightness? Why are they apprehensive? Okay? Now, for a lot of people, if we think of this movement, okay, so it's me hinging from my hips, trying to touch my toes. In my experience, I've had people spend a lot of time trying to stretch out their hamstrings. So obviously stretching this leg, stretch, 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 stretch. They've done it for quite an extended period of time and they're not seeing an improvement. I've done a quick little test with them to test the strength of their hip flexor. So hip flexor being right here on the crease of your hip. So learning how to actually use that area. So for someone who can't use the hip flexor adequately, you'll probably find that they sit back like this as an example, or they really struggle to even just sit upright, okay? So if and when you get into this position, if that is you, I'm talking to you, okay? And I'm talking to you because I want to encourage you, or I want to educate you on how we could obviously get better at this movement and how we can give your hamstrings more support. This is how I want you to think of mobility, flexibility, range of motion. If I'm lengthening a side of the body or a joint, I need to make sure that I'm getting support from the closing angle. And that works on every joint, okay? So if I'm thinking of my hip here, I want to lengthen my hamstrings. Well then, what level of support am I getting from the closing angle? So what I'm going to show you is we're going to be doing leg lifts like this, but we're going to find a variation that accommodates for you, okay? Because you're not just lifting the leg, I want you to feel the tension being created in the hip. So you can bend the knee as an example to start. You lift, you relax. Let me just show you this way. I feel like you can't really see me. So I'm going to bend one leg. The other leg is straight for the moment, but because I, in theory, can't get it off the floor, I'm going to bend it. Then I lift, I relax. You'll notice my hands are behind me. If that's easy, I bring my hands beside me. If that's easy, I bring my hands either side of that leg that I'm lifting, and I lift, okay? Before you start, I want to show you something. If I don't use my hip flexors, and I'm somebody who says, I've got tight hamstrings, look how much I've flexed my spine here, okay? This is as much flexion as is in my spine. Everything else in this movement is coming from my hip flexor, pulling my hip into an anteriorly tilted pelvis, so allowing me to rotate my hip out. I'll try to make it as obvious as possible here. So from here, all I'm going to do now is pull down from my hip flexors and roll my hip out behind me. Then I pull my hips back in. This is the same motion. Look, same thing. So if I spend time getting better at this and working towards straight legs, guess what? I'm using my hip flexors more efficiently. I'm more likely going to be able to hinge from my hips. So let's sit down on the floor to start. If you can't do this on the floor, you could also do it standing as an example, but I want to give you a little bit of a challenge. Okay? You sit on the floor?
Big challenge.
Big challenge. Big challenge for a little person. Okay, we're going 10 reps, 10-second hold on the 10th rep. Yeah. And I'm more impressed by how close your hands are to your ankles as opposed to how high you lift the leg. So if you can lift the leg more than 2 inches, I would get you to try to go either into more of an upright position or start to move your hands towards your legs. Like what I said earlier with the Jefferson curl, if you have any kind of lower back tightness, sitting against a wall as an example could also help to give you a little bit more support, but it will make it more challenging to try and lift that leg. So 10 reps in total, and then a 10-second hold to try take possession of that position that you're lifting up into, okay? Then we swap over to the other side. You can also bend this one if you want to. It might make it a bit more comfortable. You just find the position that's good for you here, okay? This is why I say it's like, it doesn't matter how it looks in the sense that the focus or the intent is what we're really searching for here. So for some of us, if you're really struggling to engage the front of the hip, it might be a good sign that you need to do this more, okay? You good?
Did my Mississippi's.
She did our Mississippi's. Okay, once you've done that, just have a little walk around and then I'll explain what we're going to do next. We're going to pair this with an agonist and an antagonist approach. And the reason why I want to highlight this is because it's super, super, super important. All right? So let me just give you an example. I am somebody who wakes up in the morning, sits down and has my breakfast. Then I get into a car and I drive to work. Then I sit at a desk. Then I get up from the desk, I go to my lunch, I sit down, yada, yada, yada. So I spend most of my day in this position, okay? Now, Danny's just said to me that I need to strengthen my hip flexor, so I've done loads of leg lifts on the floor, which is an awesome exercise. The problem now is I'm getting even more comfortable in this position, okay? So what we need to do is we need to get the body comfortable lengthening that tissue as well as contracting it. So we just contracted it. But if I get super comfortable in this position, guess what's going to happen? If I can't fully extend my hip, I'm going to start to arch from my back to get into an upright position because I'm bipedal. I need to walk around. And this is what causes those pinches in the lower back. Okay? So our hips and our spine are so closely kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Connected. Exactly. So what I want you to do here is I'm going to start to teach you how to extend the hips so you are in a bit more of an upright position and take a lot of that tension off the lower back. Okay? The best thing I've learned as an adult teaching other adults how to increase their flexibility is me allowing you to experience what I want you to do. Then you're more likely to do it, but actually understand the movement. Okay? So this idea of just do it more, in theory is awesome, but if you can see me demonstrating something and it's not really resonating with you, well then that's where we need to obviously show you how to do it, even in a different position, so you really understand what's happening, okay? So let me show you. If I was to show you hip extension, okay? The level of hip extension that I have is less than what you think, right? And I'm going to show you something here, right? So me doing this looks like I'm in a deep position, right? If I was to move this leg forward, this knee back, this looks like it's quite low, okay? But what's actually happened here is my lower back has come into play as well. So we're actually extending through my lower back. If the intent is to stretch my hip, what I would actually be better off doing is tucking the back toes to kind of give me a bit of a, like to kind of lock it in. Actually tucking my butt here and then pushing forward. So now here, I'm actually getting a stretch in my hip, but I look a lot higher than what I was just in. The way I like to teach a stretch is also with tension and support coming from the opposite side. So this is the closing angle. I am squeezing my butt, so I'm allowing my hip to lengthen. Now, if I was to say to you posterior pelvic tilt and that doesn't make sense, well, guess what? It's now my chance to show you how to do it, all right? Because once you understand and once you feel that, then when I get you to do this exercise and I say to you, hey, remember what you just felt? I want you to replicate. I'll get you to just stand here in like a squat position, half squat position, side on, please. Now what you're going to do is this. You're just going to soften the knees and come down a little bit. You're now going to tuck your butt as much as you can. Yeah, tuck your butt as much as you can. And then all I want you to do is just stand up, but don't change your hip position. you should feel like your glutes are quite tight or at least engaged, okay? I want everybody to try that right now, okay? So you squat down a little bit, tuck your butt as much as you can. Here's the analogy I give. Try to hold a credit card in your butt cheeks. You want it nice and tight. You don't want that credit card to drop, okay? The reason why I'm showing you this is because now when you go down onto the floor into that stretch position, I want you to tuck your butt the same way. I want you to hold on to that same level of tension in your glute. And then I only want you to push forward whilst you can maintain that tension, okay? So lower is not necessarily better if you're losing that tension. I'll get you to even roll that mat a little bit so it's prominent on your knee.
What do you mean? Oh.
It might be just a little bit better on your knee. Okay, so come down into just a lunge position. If you are not comfortable in this position, guys, you can literally do this standing. Same thing as where I would like take a split stance, tuck my butt, and then I just kind of shift forward to where I feel it here on the front of the hip, okay? Now, just spend a little bit of time in this position first. Just a little bit of time here, okay? You might even notice that Avril's kind of shifting forward and back. It's nice to explore these positions a little bit, so you kind of test like, oh yeah, I feel that. It can be beneficial to be close to a couch or a table or somewhere for a bit of balance, as an example. Avril doesn't get that luxury. Okay, now what I want you to do is this. I want you to shift your weight forward as long as you can keep tension in your glute. I want you to pause in that position as you breathe out, and then I want you to breathe in and come back. That's your rep, and I want you to do 10 of those. And on the 10th rep, you're going to hold in your lowest position for 3 breaths, okay? The biggest challenge here is as you shift forward and you soften your belly and you breathe out, you want to try to keep that pelvis tucked. So try to keep that tension in the glute, okay? You'll notice that it's like probably a little like tremors and wants to kind of relax a little bit. We want to try to keep that tension as best we can, okay? So 10 kind of breaths going forward is breathing out, breathing in. And then on that 10th one, you just want to hold in that deepest position and just really just focus on 3 of your strongest breaths, just to try, see if you can sink down into that lowest position.
How long am I staying there for?
3 breaths. Yeah, 3 breaths. Then slowly come out, swap over to the other side. So I'm hoping what you're noticing here is how important the breath is, or at least how much it allows you to, become more efficient in that movement, right? If you have it honed in and you feel like the breath is good, awesome. It also gives you a sign of if you're in something that you need to work on most. Let's just say, for example, you are somebody who is very stressed. I would say 99% of the world have probably higher stress levels than they need. Doing this sort of exercise, we naturally hold all our stress in our hips. When you start to learn how to kind of release that tension or that excess tension that you're holding onto the hips, it's a really nice way to actually kind of de-stress a little bit. So my 2 go-to exercises on a very stressful day are this kind of exercise where we're extending our hips, and then the Jefferson curls that we did a few minutes ago, okay? The reason being is you will actually notice that stress kind of dissipate a little bit as you do these more often, okay? Now, in saying that, if you've had a long day at work and, life is getting you down, then the exercise that you might do in the evening might be totally different than if you were feeling, absolutely amazing. Life is awesome. There's going to be 2 different approaches. So if I'm doing a Jefferson curl as an example, this one, okay? I want you to think about it like this. We might have a training rep and we might have just a I need to move rep. So if I've walked into a gym or if I've set myself 45 minutes to do a workout, the way I approach that might be different to, I've got home, I've got the kids asleep, I need a little bit of time to myself, I'm a little bit kind of stressed, I might just do a couple of these and just go through the motion. Or let's say you've been sitting at a desk for an hour or two and it's like, you know what, I'm going to get up off the chair, I'm just going to go a few little reps, no expectation, just a little bit of movement, okay? Movement and consistency is key here. The intensity is not as important in terms of the more often you do something, the better you get at it, okay? Something just to note. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to be down in a 90-90 position. This time we're going to focus on the front leg. I would recommend that you have some cushions and stuff like that to make this a little bit more effective. The reason why I keep this one till the end, and this is my favorite, is because there's a lot of people who are suffering with sciatica, okay? If you're someone who has ever had sciatic referral, this is the one that I want you to watch, okay? If you are somebody who's currently suffering with sciatica, this might be a little bit too intense for you. I'll give you a quick demonstration of something that I would do if you're currently in pain with that, okay? So the 90-90 position we did earlier on, if you are somebody who can sit in that comfortably, then cool. Let me show you. Could you give us those 2 blocks? So what I would do here is, if I'm in this position, okay? So I'm just sitting in that 90-90 position, like what I showed you earlier. So one leg is in 90 degrees, other leg is in 90 degrees. I'm gonna rotate my belly to face the front knee. From here, this is the challenge, okay? You're going to walk this back leg while still trying to keep the hip rotated. And if you feel it on the left, so let's say the front leg, if you feel it on the outside of the front leg, awesome, that's what I want, okay? If you are feeling this is uncomfortable and pinchy on the knees, I want you to come up, okay? I would say most people will benefit from coming up onto a cushion, okay? The goal is this, right? So what we're actually trying to get to is getting the back leg as straight as possible, okay? So if I raised up the knee onto a mat, I raise up my butt onto a mat. If you are sitting on something, it is imperative that your knee is making support, contact with it, okay? Because your knee is in a floating position here. It needs to have support because we don't want to force it into too much rotation. The back leg, if you can, you could even straighten it as an example, okay? I want you to find a position that is most effective for you in terms of the front leg. We're trying to feel a stretching sensation on the outside of the butt for the front leg. Stay in this position if you've got into it, but what I want to show you quickly, if you're somebody who's suffering with sciatica, what you could potentially do here, and you can manage to get into that 90-90 position, is just get used to kind of creating like half circles around you, okay? So what I'm effectively doing here is I'm trying to tickle with that nerviness, only going as far as I can manage and then coming out when I need to, okay? So if you need a bit of a challenge on that hip, that's what I would do. If you're not able to sit in the 90-90 position, then all I would do here is cross my legs like this, so standing but cross-legged, and I would just reach down to one side, come back up, reach down to the other side, come back up. So I feel that kind of lengthening where I feel it. You could also do this beside a wall to give you a bit more support. Okay, pick the variation for you. I'll get you to sit down on the floor. I want you to locate that lowest position that you can get into. Lowest position is this, so you can sit up in them if you need to. I'm just going to give you one for your hand as well.
Is that wrong?
Well, you just tell me if you're getting a stretch on the hip. There's no wrong here. So what I would get you to do is probably higher up to see if you can get into a deeper position, okay? So sometimes hiring up the hips, guys, is not a regression. It's a way of you locating an effective stretch. Okay, so try and straighten that arm behind you, or straighten the leg behind you. And now, if you can, you want to try to push this one forward.
Okay.
Yeah, and then walk this up a bit. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You feel it now? Okay, move this over a bit. Okay, sit back on it. So you really want to be here.
Okay.
Do you feel it there?
A little bit.
So as you do it, try and straighten this leg back.
That's better.
So with this, what we're searching for is that tension. Now, if you're somebody who's not getting the tension, don't worry, because we are going to be making this a little bit more dynamic. The challenge is this. If we think of a good morning, okay, this is a good morning. I hinge from my hips, I come back up. You are going to be doing that in this position because that's what will help you to increase it as well. Think of it like trying to push your butt out behind you as you do it. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then you come back up. I want you to go 10 repetitions, and then on the 10th rep, hold down the bottom for 10 seconds. Then you would swap over to the opposite side. So breathe out as you feel that tension increase. Really try and rotate those hips out behind you. So 10 in total. Hold that position in the bottom. Really think of that trying to push your hips out behind you. That's just to encourage more lengthening through that tissue in and around the hip. Push your knee into the floor or the block when you want to come out of this position. So you want to be quite active. And then just swap over to the opposite side. Just be mindful. You might have picked your favorite side without even noticing it. So just be okay with wherever you are on the other side. Okay, again, nice big strong breaths. And then only just lower down to wherever you feel comfortable. You want to find that kind of just about where you're getting a stretch position to start. And then from there, we really want to try and hinge from the hip. So even think of that front leg, draw the knee in a little bit, okay? So as in pull your leg back into your hip. So whatever leg's on the front, no, actually like pull the top of the leg. Yeah, think of this motion. So it's like I'm trying to pull my leg back in. Does that make sense?
Draw that in, yeah.
Yeah, pull it in. It'll just give you more tension to play with here. So 10 in total, 10-second hold at the bottom. And the good news is this will be the last exercise that you have to do. Now what you'll notice today is that we didn't have to use too much equipment. I'm hoping that we still got a massive benefit from what you saw. And, you know, even now, I've been doing this for like quite some time, 10 years. I still see a massive benefit being consistent with this sort of stuff, okay? The difference is that when you do it more often, then you might start to add it into certain movements as well. So like if I'm going to the gym and I'm going to do a particular exercise, and I know that one of these exercises helps me to open up my hips more, helps me to get a bit more efficient in my lower back, then maybe doing that before you do that obviously is massively beneficial, okay? If you're watching live, we're going to have a Q&A. Obviously, I'm going to say goodbye just for the people who are rewatching this, and Q&A will start. So thanks. Hope you got a lot from today.